Welcome to this presentation where we will compare standard or advanced scheduling techniques with archiving automation provided. This document is a comparison between standard or advanced scheduling techniques compared with archiving automation provided by the third-party solution ASC. Please visit our website www.tgc-software.com. SAP Archiving main transaction is Sarah. Using this transaction, you may run manual data archiving. When running data archiving for real, you will however run directly SAP archiving programs. Archiving is performed by an archiving object. For each archiving session, several jobs will have to run. Some archiving objects request a preprocessing job, not to mention a customer-specific preprocessing job. Then, an archiving job will create archive files. When using archive files, you will define its storage to a content server, which can take place before or after the deletion job. When you are not using archive link, you may want to back up your archive files on a storage area. The archiving job usually generates several archive files. For each file, a deletion job will access the archive and delete data from the database. On some occasions, archiving post-processing jobs are required and may be completed by customer-specific post-processing jobs. When using SAP AS will be populated usually automatically, but SAP AS Unload needs to be run manually for all data that doesn't longer need to be accessed. This is performed using SARI transaction. As we see, an archiving session is a process that requires numerous jobs to be performed using several SAP archiving programs. Managing an archiving session requires to handle exceptions during this process. For the sake of simplicity, we will focus on the basic archiving process, the easiest one, where only two jobs are required. An archiving job in order to create the archive files, and a deletion job in order to check an archive file integrity, and delete the data from the database. With automatic variant creation, you may run archiving this way. You need to define what archiving needs to be performed today, this week or this month. Not a big deal, however, some aspects are to be taken into account. The question is not only what archiving job should run, but what archiving period for each object are to be run. What's important is what will end up in the archive file. For instance, in this example, we will guarantee that only invoices from period January 2009 will exist in generated archive files for this archiving session. But of course, the variant will be different every time we run archiving. For example, archiving accounting document for this company code requires to be managed differently for usual accounting period and for closing periods 13 to 16. So, you have to think at which period you want to archive data. Company codes may have different closing periods, and this impacts archiving. So, scheduling will depend on a company code fiscal closing months. Keep in mind, technical person running a scheduler is not knowledgeable in FI and will have a tough time linking the fiscal SAP periods, such as their one, to a specific month, such as October. Variant creation is a key point for data archiving. We will see that creating detailed variants allow you to improve archive data access performance and to efficiently manage SAP organizational changes such as system splits or company sales when a part of a group is sold to another company. This process is very important, so let's have a look at two examples. First example is when you sell a company code or decide to split your SAP system. Let's imagine you have two company codes in your SAP system and that you have been creating company-specific variants for accounting data archives. When you sell company code 2000 or split your SAP system, you will just need to move archive files from one file system or content server to another one. If you're using more generic variant, such with a simple scheduling, then you end up with mixed archive files. Remember, archive file may not be modified and reload is not always possible. You could end up with a technical problem, not to mention issues related to confidential data when companies are sold. For instance, SAP sales order will be archived by sales order of months 1 to 3 and by cross-company sales order. Cross-company sales orders can be removed from file system. Let's assume our user wants to access February sales orders. Technically, SAP will only have to open February sales orders, so this will reduce access time. As you see, variant creation is a not-so-simple process unless automated. you will have to create multiple variants for a single archiving object to take into account time segregation, prevent organizational changes, system splits, and to allow efficient response time during archive data access. Manual variant creation is cumbersome and generates errors that may translate in business users losing access to recent and important data. So, your process should not be manual in order to prevent errors. Beware, a lot of archiving objects do not have a reload option available, and a decay archive file may not be changed afterwards. You may try to use TWARF options, that is, using SAP variables of variants, but they are far from providing a complete solution for variant creation. And if you try to bypass this issue by selecting generic variants with no time reference, you will end up with a poor performance as shown in the following. Let's imagine yearly archiving takes place on an SAP system for an object. We will suppose database growth is 20 GB a year and that we use a generic variant without time information. For the initial archiving, let's assume we archive 19 GB of year 1, so that 1 GB stays in the database. However, as no selection data is set in the archive, even recent data will be checked for archiving, so archiving job will be longer with a generic variant. For the second year, archiving will recheck year 1 data for archiving, although documents will probably not be archived. This runtime could be avoided, but not with a generic variant. For the third year, year 1 and year 2 needs to be checked again, so runtime is still longer. Let's imagine when you archive monthly since 4 years. Only 1 month out of 48 will provide real archiving results. Here, you see that archiving runs are becoming less and less efficient over time. Then, imagine that for the next turn, some data from year 1 became archivable, and that you archive 10% of year 1. You end up with 0.9 GB in your database for year 1. But archive files will be mixed with year 1 and year 4 data. When looking at Sarah transaction, you will not be able to know which data is contained in the archive file. Now, when a user needs to access year 1 data, he will need to open all archive files. Keep in mind you will generate one archive file for every 50 to 200 MB of data, so you will end up with thousands of files. You don't want user to open that number of files sequentially when accessing data archives. When opening too many files, transaction takes too long and you end up with a timeout. Now, you're probably convinced variants will need to be created preciously and for each archiving session. Next step is to deal with scheduling prerequisites. For instance, some archiving objects allow for item data archiving or total archiving. One example is when archiving special ledger documents using FISL data. More important, some data archiving run needs to be performed in a precise order. Key point here is that dependencies are not defined at job level but at variant level. A typical dependency comes from sales and distribution. Sales delivery, RVLIKP, needs to be archived before sales order, SD, VBAK, so scheduling is variant dependent. As you may see, identifying jobs to be processed when taking into account creating variants and identify dependencies may become a time-consuming process, even when you use a third-party scheduler. In ASC, you define this easily like this. Managing relationships between objects will be done automatically. You only have to define it once in the ASC customizing menu. ASC comes with some predefined relationships that may be changed or completed. Here, we will define that for French companies, for ASC option 1, there is a dependency between sales and deliveries. Option 1 could identify a specific group or sales order type, for example, sales order with deliveries. So, the relationship will not be applied when archiving sales order without deliveries. Enter RVLIKP sales delivery, which should be archived before archiving SD VBAK sales orders. In ASC, you may even add time dependencies when deliveries span 2 months. Once saved, your archiving dependency will be managed automatically. As you may see, without ASC, identifying jobs to be processed when taking into account creating variants and identify dependencies may become a time-consuming process, even when you are going to use a third-party scheduler. We suggest you to take some time to imagine how to implement a similar scheduling using an external scheduler. Archiving yearly is a quite tough process to schedule. Let's imagine your company generates 100 GB of CO detailed data a year. We will look at a 6-year period. Such information must be contained in COEP table may be archived using CO item archiving object. If your users require data access through SAP transaction during a 4-year period, you may do better than keeping 600 GB in the database. You may apply OSS Note 52.16.04 that creates two SAP AS structures, SAP CO Item 1 and SAP CO Item 2, and allow you to access archive data through SAP standard transactions such as KSB1, KSBP, and some other transactions. During deletion job, SAP will load the two SAP AS structures. In this case, every time you archive 100 GB, you will generate 42 GB of SAP AS tables in the database. Let's assume you archive data after 12 months and keep the SAP AS data during 3 additional years. Thus, after 6 years, you end up with only 226 GB instead of 600 GB, but you need to unload manually the SAP AS structure after 3 years, and this has to be done manually using SARI transaction. Not only SAP AS unload is done manually, but you will have to do it for the first time 3 years after starting archiving. Most people forget to do it and pile up data on SAP AS structure inside SAP database. Some companies make an extensive usage of SAP structure. This is especially true on some industry-specific solutions such as SAP Utilities, or when using OpenText DocuLink, a SAP AS-based solution. In ASC you define SAP AS Unload easily. Let me show you how. SAP AS Unload is defined in ASC Customizing menu. We will define SAP AS Archive structure for SAP CO Item 1 and 2. In this case, retention rules may be different depending on CR area, group or set, linked to the archiving area defined in the ASC Customizing. We add SAP CO Item 2 archive structure. ASC Customizing is successfully finished. Now, ASC will automatically unload SAP AS structure 3 years after starting the archiving project. This means ASC will save you 42 GB a year. For large corporations with operations worldwide, data archiving should not impact system performances. This impacts scheduling process. Let's imagine your business is in US, sales organization 1000, and you have subsidiary in Singapore, sales organization 2000, with a US-based system. You will run an ASC session for US during nighttime and another ASC session for Singapore during daytime. This way, each user will not be impacted by data archiving, and when time slot occurs during write and delete jobs, either because you set up a timing for ensuring efficient file backup, or because you need time to create and activate PBS index, your users will not miss those data because they will be out of the office. Now, let's tackle another archiving issue. SAP archiving scheduling should never affect performances. We may guess nobody wants to archive FI documents during fiscal year closing. We'll pick another example, sales order entry. Let's imagine one sales organization is dedicated to small business and that sales customers usually call your sales center on Monday morning because they thought about stock replenishment during weekend. This sales organization will require high system performance from 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. every Monday morning. With ASC, you customize this as simply as you will see in the following demonstration. Here we enter prohibited time slots for sales and distribution archiving objects, sales documents, billing documents, and deliveries. For each object, we enter archiving area, prohibited job, day, and start and end time. Here we select the type of prohibited job. Then we enter day. Now we enter start and end time. We select the factory calendar. We mark the selected day as a work day. Now, your sales organization can be sure to have the guarantee of a high system performance on Monday morning. Let's show real cases scenarios. It's often better to show some real-life issues. Sales come from companies that performed successful archiving project with experienced consultants and an internal efficient team. Yet, let's look what they ended up with. As a first example, this company has a 2 TB database. They archive 12 archiving objects, but most volume is SD related, not surprisingly because it's a retail company. In case this company needs to access some SD data or to extract them, they do not know which archive data are contained in which archive file, so they will have to access all archive files and not selected one. Data reload will be very long, and standard data access on sequential read may end up with abandon. Using ASC, this company will have the following archiving nodes and archive files with carefully classified data. This makes all the difference, as shown on this other screen copy from a real productive system using ASC. Are you sure your external scheduler did the job? Once again, this example is from a productive real-life system at a medium-sized company using a third-party external scheduler. You may recognize a document distribution screen obtained using the PBS Database Analyzer Plus. This picture is from a productive system. The company creates several million entries on GLPCA table every month. Because they use ECPCA ITM archiving object, they end up with only a few thousand of them staying in the database. They use a 5-month retention period. In this example, you clearly see they missed April 2008 archiving, but started May 2008 archiving, thus ending up with 24 million entries rather than 20 million entries. The external scheduling tool was unable to inform them from this issue. ASC would have managed it automatically. We already saw installing archiving scheduling is complex, but it ends up even worse because when your system gets older, you will add more and more archiving objects. Instead of having a basic ASC customizing change to add those new archiving objects, you will have to change your scheduling process. Then, let's imagine you move to a Unicode system or you add a large company to your system. Will your weekly scheduling still be efficient? Will you know it? Will you have time to change it while implementing archiving procedures from the new companies you bring into your system? Once SAP Standard ADK customizing is done, let ASC do the scheduling and run for you. It only takes minutes to customize and set up a new archiving object in ASC. Thank you for your attention for this demonstration and your interest in ASC. Please visit our website www.tgc-sciencesoftware.com or click on the button to ask for an online meeting. We hope to see you soon again.